Welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have with us Renae Ninneman. She is a founder of Beyond Tourism, a business dedicated to helping travelers and global citizens connect meaningfully across cultures. So we'll learn from her practical skills to avoid misunderstandings, build genuine relationships, and transform your global experiences, whether you are traveling, working abroad, or leading diverse teams. Welcome to the show, Renae.
Thank you for having me, Ajay.
You're welcome. Welcome to the show. Welcome to India in this online form. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we are going to talk right now. We'll talk about how one can travel with cultural intelligence. We'll talk about this. But before that, let's talk a bit about your journey, your background, so that people know who they are listening to.
Okay. So, yeah, my name's Renae. I'm from the U.S. I grew up in the state of Michigan. And where I kind of started to come outside of my comfort zone and travel a lot was after college. And I went to South Korea and I taught English to kids. And that was my 1 year experience of living in another culture. And as anybody knows, if you've lived in another culture, it's very rewarding and also very challenging. So I learned a lot. I made a lot of mistakes. I made some great friends. But it wasn't until I came home from South Korea when I started to really understand differences in culture. I read some books about cultural values, some research, and a lot of things crystallized for me in understanding some of the experiences that I had. So I went on to work with refugees and immigrants in my community. So I was able to have cross-cultural interactions and experience within my community, which is the case of many, many places in the world, which was really great. And I've worked with people from more than 30 different countries over the course of my career, though I've only traveled to 13. And so just as the years have gone, I've been more and more interested in going more deep into this topic of cultural intelligence, which is the ability to interact more effectively with people from diverse backgrounds. And this is a skill, right? This is something we can practice, we can get better at, and we can learn. And so that's part of what I do is I help people build their cultural intelligence skills so they can connect with other people who are different from them.
Absolutely, Renee. So let's understand it better from your point of view and also from several other points of view. Is that how should we understand cultural intelligence in today's time? Earlier, they used to say, do in Rome as the Romans do. But now, if Rome is inviting a lot of visitors, in several places, people, then they also know that who these visitors are, how their culture is, how they want to be, welcomed. In that aspect, when it's a global world, everyone knows more about each other. The lingo is almost the same. You see, Generation Z, they will talk in the same language almost everywhere. In that aspect, I want to understand the importance of cultural intelligence. Is it very relevant or is it something of the past?
I think it's relevant. I think it's even more relevant than it has been. You make an interesting point, though, that, that the younger generation is communicating in different ways. But really what I'm talking about is not necessarily about like slang or what TV shows you're watching or even necessarily, what you're wearing, the social media you're following. And it's all this like below the iceberg stuff that we are taught as children. And I am confident that the way I was raised in the US is very different than the way you were raised, right? And even somebody, people who are the same age, there's still something very different about the ways that we're raised in different countries. And so this gets to the very deep, deep side of culture. So I don't talk about like the visible differences. I'm talking about the invisible differences. And so these are things that a lot of times people don't even know how to explain. They're like, well, that person was rude. Well, why? Well, I don't know, but something to do with culture. Like the culture was different and they were rude to me. I'm like, okay, but you can't explain what happened, you know? And so a lot of times, especially with tourism, millions of people travel to different countries without necessarily thinking about how culture is going to impact their interactions there. Um, and so they just kind of walk into these spaces, they act the same as they do when they're at home, and they don't realize that not everything is just, you can't just act the same and expect everything and everyone to be happy. And every place is different, you know? And so it is about, greetings a little bit, but also individualism versus collectivism, right? So I talk a lot about cultural values like that, or expressiveness versus neutral. How do you express on your face your feelings, or do you kind of keep them inside you? And the issue is that a lot of these cultural values can cause mistrust between people. So if I'm from a culture that is very expressive, and I am, the United States can be back and forth on this issue, but I'm more expressive for sure. And if I'm interacting with someone from a very neutral country, and so they might think that I'm out of control with my emotions, that I can't control myself, and I might think that they're hiding something, but they're just doing what they were taught, right? So it can get very tricky. I do think that, like you said, there are some things that are a little bit more accessible, music and movies. There is a lot more shared interest in some of those, but how we treat each other and even how we view each other is really varied around the planet.
Absolutely. So let's understand it from the way you see it and explain to in your as the founder of Beyond Tourism. One is, the traveling, pure traveling part, and a lot of people travel in different places. Someday it can be the US, and another day it can be any other country in any other part of the world. How do they calibrate this? Is there a standard format that will work everywhere, or every time you have to look at those that country, adopt and adapt according to that? What is your best advice in that if you are purely traveling? Then that is why because when you are in business mode, then you are in a slightly different mode. But when you are traveling just for fun, with family perhaps, and or maybe with friends, how should one navigate that aspect?
Yeah, so the particular model that I teach, the CQ model, cultural intelligence model, there's two kind of chunks of it. So there's one part of it, it's the cultural values. And so that I can understand that, like my previous example, I come from an effective place. And if I travel to another place that is not effective, then I may need to adjust my expressiveness to be more appealing and connect better with the people there, right? And so learning about those cultural values and then can really help, and then learning to adjust as well. So it's not that I'm changing myself, but I can adapt my behavior. And so it's learning about the cultural values. The other chunk is the cultural values, but then there's the cultural intelligence part. And so there's 4 dimensions of cultural intelligence. There's CQ motivation, CQ drive. That's how motivated are you to learn and to adapt and be in these different settings. There's CQ knowledge. This is the facts and figures. And I know in Japan they're neutral, and in Mexico they're effective and they express a lot more, like that kind of stuff. Or how do I open a bank account, or how do I spend money, or words and the language. Then there's CQ strategy. And that's when you prepare yourself to go into a different cultural space and sort of plan ahead. So I'm going to interact with people from India. What do I need to think in my head to prepare to communicate with them more effectively? And then CQ action, that's when I'm actually adjusting my behavior and I'm changing a couple things here and there to make people around me be more comfortable. And so that in that way, I can build relationships. I can make other people more comfortable around me, no matter where they're from. And so there are certainly some people in some situations, if you are an American business person working in India and that's all you do, then you're going to want to focus on that. And that you can do that in this model. But you can also take this knowledge and skills anywhere in the world and be like, okay, well, this country is here and this cultural value here on this cultural value. And you can start to learn more about how people behave and think and more broadly. So it's useful no matter where you go. And certainly, like your example of going with a family somewhere, if you're with your family, you're going to be your normal self, the culture that you share with them. And then in the ideal situation, well, now I'm going to be interacting with some people from the US. Well, now I'm going to shift my little cultural behaviors to interact and then make that interaction go a little more smoothly. And then, great, that went well. Now I'm back to my own family culture. And so the real abilities is to adapt, right? To adapt to what the setting is needing, to make other people comfortable around you.
Absolutely. And suppose it was a business sort of a visit, then how does it change, or it doesn't change at all? Because business, both sides try to come around on the similarity of the situation, what the topic is, what the agenda is, and that time both are in much more uh, in the mode of bringing that cohesiveness. How does that work? And if any sort of a misunderstanding that can develop either as a person who is traveling or even in terms of doing business, how does that work? Because a lot of meetings are also happening online. You do talk to them online and then you meet them offline also if needed.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because cultural differences can show up in emails too. So I know for me in the United States, it's very common for us to even skip the greeting, like, hey, just wanted to check, did you get this thing finished? And I don't even say hello. But there are many places in the world where that's very rude, even in an email. So I should spend some time creating a greeting, right? So there's some of those same things exist digitally. But in general, I think when it comes to business settings or any settings when you're interacting cross-culturally, and the important thing is if there's a miscommunication, to discuss it and to bring it up. And to me, the real benefit of cultural intelligence is that, especially if you work ahead, you can prevent some of these things. You can say, hey, look, in the United States, we do things this way. We are this way. We behave this way. We're very loud or something, loud and direct communicators, right? So we say things very clearly, very directly. And we know that sometimes that can be rude in some places around the world, who maybe want to be, deflect and like not be so direct in telling us yes or no, just, maybe. So this is how we are, and we know this about us. And so can you tell us a little bit about your culture? If you're uncomfortable, will you say no? Or will you say maybe and then mean no? Always say yes and mean no, or say yes and mean maybe. Like there's so many different ways to approach that. So let's just talk about that, ahead of time so we understand each other. That way, the communication is clear and people can know what to expect. And it also is not harmful. So it's not like me as an American coming in saying, but you said you would do this and you're not doing this, and that's bad, like this bad situation where people are now not trusting each other. if you come into it and you're just like, hey, this is us, this is you, can we just make sure that we like are on the same page and we know what to expect from each other? And then, if you're starting to feel angry or frustrated, go back to the beginning, talk about expectations, and just clarify. It can take a long time sometimes to get this to be effective. And that's why this is a skill that takes a lot of practice. It doesn't come naturally to us. Most humans, it doesn't come naturally to, because we're raised to think a certain way, to behave a certain way. So it doesn't always come easily. It takes time to practice.
Absolutely. Nowadays, it's an age of remote working. A lot of people, uh, Indian companies will have uh, people from outside working for Indian companies. So maybe somebody supervising will be an Indian, or a lot of Indians work for outside companies. A lot of time, the bosses will be from other countries, from the US, UK, or any other part of the world. And in that, you may have never met them. You see them
Mhm.
on meetings and all that stuff. And how do you resolve those those situations where Asians will work a bit differently? They look at atmosphere differently. They understand vibes differently. An American will look at it from a different perspective. This guy is not speaking much, so it means either he's not getting it or he's not too excited about the project, which may not be. Again, in India, different regions we have got, people will respond a bit differently. I respond because I am just like this only. So mine perhaps will be liked by a few more people, but not everyone cannot be everyone cannot be the same. In that
Yes.
aspect, how do you navigate this world of remote working that works best for everyone?
Yeah. I think kind of what I was saying before is clearing up like setting expectations early, because the problem with cultural differences, these deep cultural differences, is we all have different expectations, right? And it's so funny how like small things like we just expect, like um is working across time zones. Is complicated too, right? There's so much complicated in what you are describing, because you've got time zones, you've got digital, you're unable to connect genuinely as humans. And some people are really going to struggle with that more than others, especially if they're from a culture that values relationships and values that connection. That's going to be harder for them, right? And they're going to want to like maybe spend longer on the Zoom call than the other people. And so these little like points of friction can come up, like, well, why are these people talking on Zoom so much? I don't care about their, like, why are they asking me about my kids? I don't, they live on the other side of the planet. I don't care if they know about my family or something like that. But then the other person is just trying to build a connection to feel like you can work together, right? And so that can build some friction, right? I don't want to talk about family, but I want to talk about family. I want to get to know you. I'm working with you. Or maybe your boss is not talking to you about your family and your life and you want them to, or vice versa, right? Like that. There can be so many of these little things and how we interact as humans that can pop up. So how we want to interact with each other, how we want to treat each other. And it's, when do you respond? Like, how do you, when you stop working, do you still check your emails, or are you done for the day? What is respectful and what is disrespectful? Is it good to message your boss after hours, or is it bad? And are you expected to remember all the time zones or not? So what is the expectation? And so different countries are going to have those. So again, like addressing, because a lot of times people don't even consider talking about these differences. And so What does it mean for you to work with a remote team? What does it mean for you to work with a remote team? What are the practices? What's coming up that we didn't expect? But now that we're working together, we're finding there's these points of friction that people are arguing or not getting along for some reason. What are those?
Absolutely. One thing I want to understand is, thus a lot of people want to control the conversation, and it can be from either part of the world, either in written communication, either in verbal communication. Maybe that's the way they think that it works best for me. Another person culturally may be much more accommodative, but it does not mean that they want to give control. It's just that they want to work with you. They're trying to understand you in a better manner. It happens even in a podcast hosting world. Many a times, some most of the guests are very accommodative, but then you can meet some guests who are, you can sense it. It's not that you don't know it, you sense it, but you want to see that common ground. You don't want to judge in that sense, but you don't want to also give an impression that you can take away it all, and then it can create a problem for everyone, because things will not work out. And
Yeah.
with a lot of people, it's the personality, it's the training. Somebody from a marketing background will have much more of that, uh, want to infuse that into things. Sales background will have much more infused, and the other person will think this guy is only thinking about themselves, want to take away rather than giving away. All culturally related. Also, it can be true, it cannot be true, it can be another way, other way around also. How do you maintain the part of cultural navigation intelligence, but at the same time you also ensure that you don't let the control freaks take away everything that you are trying to work around it?
Oh boy. How do you prevent the control freaks? Um, I think just asking them directly. Bringing it to the surface, because again, a lot of times these things are not discussed. So I think bringing them to the surface is important, but also sometimes you have to reflect on your own self too, you know? So sometimes we forget that we can be perceived in different ways from people from other cultures, right? So I'm seeing this person as kind of controlling. I wonder how they're seeing me, right? And I'm thinking very negatively about this person. And because of the way they're acting, are they acting this way because they're a jerk? Because there are jerks in every culture.
Absolutely.
Sometimes it's hard to identify the jerk versus the cultural difference, though.
Right, right.
And so if you're just assuming that everyone's a jerk, then probably there's something in you that is not understanding that culture. That's what I think. And so if it's just one time, one jerk you have to deal with, then, sometimes you could wait it out. But if it's the same time, a lot of jerks, or there's something about this culture that you're interacting with that is making you angry and frustrated, like a lot of the work for cultural intelligence is internal, right? I know I'm an American. I am individualist. You know what I mean? That is how I was raised. And so for me to go into a collectivist society takes some work, takes some adjustment, right? So I have to be able to identify that. I'm a direct communicator because this is where I grew up. So if I'm going somewhere else that's not direct communicator, I have to be paying attention to the things that aren't being said and trying to read between the lines for the things that I might be missing. So I have to be ready for that. Okay. If I know that about myself, and then I'm going to another country and nobody will tell it to me straight. And I'm like, everybody's lying to me. Everybody's lying to me. Nobody's telling me the truth. All these people are liars, then that's a me problem. That's me not understanding the very polite way people are trying to communicate with me when I'm used to just straight, direct communication. And so you have to watch for yourself too, and that's where I think the cultural values are really helpful, so that like, where am I coming from, and then where am I going to, and then also you have to be able to identify those cultural values in other people, because if you can't see them in yourself, you certainly can't see them in someone else, and then you'll never be able to adjust and adapt. So I think that's the question. Like, are you frustrated because this person is a jerk? Or is there some other cultural thing happening that maybe you just aren't grasping? And that's when those like open, honest questions are like, very helpful. So just a question for you. Is this something, can I also share my perspective in this? Or is this something that you need to always have, like, I don't know. I'm not always the best at asking those polite questions, but, I think that's a really important thing to look inside as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. Let's understand it from the ground, from your clients. What are the type of clients you get? What is it that they generally come to you for?
I'm still a very new business, so I haven't had too many clients yet, but they're mostly people who are traveling or moving abroad, and um, they're looking to get better at this skill, because they know that if they um, can have some more of these skills, then they're going to have a better experience. So I can really, there's I don't think there's enough people in the world talking about this, especially considering there's 8 billion people, and the world is getting more connected every day. Like, I don't think there's enough people talking about this, but there are certainly other, especially in the corporate area. I think it's easier to find cultural intelligence training and stuff like that. Um, but I can really help anyone, especially I would say somebody who is curious and feels like they do need to learn more, especially at like an entry level. Um, so, somebody traveling long term, moving abroad, all of that kind of stuff, that I can be very, very helpful with. But please reach out if anyone's curious. I'm happy to, listen and chat and see if I can help you in any way.
Absolutely. There is much to learn about all this from you, Renae. And I'm sure a lot of people, a lot of individuals, businesses, families would want to connect with you, learn more from you, about you, and also from your company, be engaged with your company beyond tourism. What's the best way for them to do so?
They can visit my website at goingbeyondtourism.com. Also, feel free to email me, Renae, Renae, at goingbeyondtourism.com. You can find me on TikTok and Instagram as well, on Beyond Tourism or Going Beyond Tourism, one of those two combinations. You can usually find me. So.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.